Hello, people. This is Lee Cole 3 podcast with my partner, James Proctor. And today we are going to do a show on somebody. I did a show on this person like a year and a half ago. I really wasn't satisfied with it because I just got into this genre and he's such a fascinating guy. And I wanted to talk about him. And his name is Frank Cali. Now, Frank Cali, as everybody knows, he was killed by a nut job, and we'll talk about that also as we go on. But I'm going to, now that I have my partner James Proctor here, we really tore things apart, and we're going to talk about things with Mr. Cali that not many people discuss. James,
Right.
how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really good, Lee. How are you today?
I'm looking forward to this story. This guy was a unique type of guy. I mean, he worked with the Sicilians.
Yes.
He went to jail one time. He didn't have any violence in his life, in his career, but yet, he was the acting boss for several years, not several years, 3-4 years.
Yeah.
So why don't you give us an idea? Where was Frank born? And explain his family upbringing and stuff.
Yeah, of course. And so just to let everyone know, we really did a lot of research on this where we talked to people that knew Frank, that was involved with Frank. So a couple of really big sources. So wanted everyone to know that there's going to be things here that you've not heard before. So anyway, yeah, Frank Cali was born in New York City. So he was born March 26th of 1965. And so he had a background, even though he was born in New York City, his family's from Palermo, Sicily, and his father is Augusto Cesare Cali, and then
say that 3 times real fast.
Yeah, Augusto Cesare.
Okay.
And then Agata Shameka was his mother, and so they're both from Palermo, and everyone knew Frank is Frankie Boy, and so his parents came to the U.S. in the early '60s. They lived on 18th Avenue in Brooklyn. 18th Avenue is most people in this genre know that was a big area of mob influence there.
So they basically moved from Sicily, right? And
Mhm.
from what I understand, the father, they don't know much about the family's ties back there, but they do know that he was probably tied. Uh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
But
they know a little bit about that. I mean, definitely, and we'll talk about that. But when they came to 18, so basically came to the
so they took,
states.
I'm sorry. So
Sorry.
they moved him to an area of Brooklyn that was like everybody knows that area was totally mobbed up at that time.
Yeah, exactly. And specifically, a lot of Sicilians live there, Sicilian Italians, and so he ran a music store called Arcobaleno Italiano, and so that means rainbow in Italian. And so, as a young kid, Frank worked for his parents' record shop, and also, as he grew up in the 80s, so most of the time, like I say, he's born in 65, so his teen years, most of that was in the early 80s, and so you'd see him frequenting some of the mobbed up cafes and social clubs, and so
Did
he was.
did his father have any record or anything, or was he?
No, but what's interesting is he has never made. He wasn't part of the Sicilian mafia either. But interestingly, he was mentioned in the Pizza Connection investigation.
And FBI questioned him in 1986, and it's
Yep.
on record, but
Hmm.
he has no personal criminal record.
No, no, not at all. But he was a partner, a friend of one of the mafiosos named Domenico Adamita, and then and that guy worked for Gaetano Badalamenti, who was a big Sicilian boss, kind of a boss of
James, you notice
bosses
I'm
guy.
keeping my mouth shut today and letting you pronounce those names.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be made. I'm going to get made fun of, but I figured I'd rather have you made fun of with these names today.
yeah,
And you've been practicing on them, huh? And
a
looking at
little
the
bit.
names and everything. That's the
Yeah,
funny.
exactly.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. So we'll get to the kid, he's growing up. He's growing up on 18th Avenue. And
Hmm.
then he gets married, right? Why don't you explain that to us in in the
Yeah.
1990s?
Yeah. So Frank Cali ended up marrying a lady named Rosaria Inzerillo. And so that is, a family back in, well, they're here too, but also in Sicily, they were they're a big mafia family. And so
I
his
mean, they were
wife,
real. If I remember, they were a real big family. A matter of fact, the only reason they wound up leaving Sicily was because the Corleone family, just like they speak up in The Godfather, beat that family.
yeah,
And
there was some big problems, the wars going on between those families. And so she was the sister of a Gambino soldier named Petro Inzerillo, and so everyone knew him as Tall Pete.
he's in this picture, right?
Yes, yes. So you'll see him on the left.
The tall guy.
Yeah, the tall guy, and all those are and then Frank Cali is the third to the right, and then the other two are folks that are Sicilian.
So Callie just tied himself into his wife, who was from Sicily. He got
Hmm.
involved with that family from Sicily, and he bought the Sicilians. Eventually, they would become big part, but we'll get into that of his
Yeah,
during
exactly.
his power.
Yeah, and it's interesting, when he was growing up, he was basically who he ran around with were the sons, nephews, and grandsons of these Gambino, Inzerillo clans, and that's another family that the Gambinos that Frank Cali is related to.
Well, the uncles are, her uncles are John and Joe Gambino. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And they knew each other even before he got married. And the Gambinos, they were running 18th Avenue at the time. John Gambino, and so yeah, it's definitely a big Sicilian presence. And Frank was related to a lot of them, either by marriage or directly by blood.
And is this gentleman is his wife's house?
Yeah, so that's a guy that believe is her grandfather that was also was a soldier, one of the old time Sicilians,
So
or
we're
the
talking.
Anzarillos.
So we're talking that this woman is, everybody around her whole life has been mobbed up even more than Callie at that time.
Yeah, exactly. And these guys, these people, a lot of them, just with the family connections, they would marry. They would. It was just That's just how things were done. They wanted to keep these families together. So you'd see a lot of people, marrying first, second, and third cousins. That's just common with the Sicilians.
So he's growing up on 18th Avenue. Explain how that whole thing worked with him growing up on 18th Avenue.
Yeah. So what happened was is that that's where Frank Cali actually first got on record with the Gambino family, and so he was under Jackie the Nose D'Amico, and so D'Amico was close to John Gotti Senior, as we know, and so
And Mikey Scars
Mikey Scars was also there.
he
Mikey
was the
Scars.
deputy to Jackie the Nose, I believe.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So he was the deputy, and so uh, he was very close as well to Frank Cali. He loved Frank Cali. He said that Frank Cali was a prince, a real gentleman, and so John Gotti, you know, knew of him, but wasn't that close to him. It's just this was kind of towards the later years, and when because Gotti ended up going to prison, but John Gambino, obviously, that was another was close, and so
And
yeah,
then so you have Mikey. I'm going to put up a video of something Mikey Scar says about him, and then
yeah,
we'll move on from. We got this video from that web from Mikey Scars and
yeah.
RJ Roger. But I'm
Hmm.
going to put this up. And this is going to be very brief, but here we go.
Just a gentleman, just a respected guy, respectable guy. Just wasn't. And I asked you before, and I think you don't mind me saying this, but you told me like sometimes families just put guys up front every now and then, but maybe there's somebody back there somewhere else. And I asked you last week about Jackie Knows. You think he was ever the boss? And this is an unofficial answer you're going to give because you wasn't there. But could you see Frank Cali as being someone who would have been the boss of like the actual boss or in the administration? Or
well, look, going back to the fist fight contest comment. My point was they were making Frankie out to be this drug dealer along with all the other Gambinos. They were making him out to be a killer, a violent guy. And my comment was, Frankie's not that way. Frankie's not in the drug business. I was with the guy a lot. He was with me a lot. He was with Jackie a lot. The guy had an acumen for business. Whether it would be lucky, it's hard to say he's lucky when he was murdered like that. But he was very lucky, and when every time he touched something in business, it succeeded because he was a good guy, and he knew how to put people together and not be greedy. Frankie had tremendous quality about sharing business and putting people together. He was really good at that, putting people in place and made a lot of friends. So when I made that comment, it wasn't to take anything away from Frank.
No, I didn't take it that way.
No, I'm just saying if anybody ever thought that or how, because you take a snippet, you talk to somebody, right? And they take a little snippet and they make it sound like, oh, that guy, Michael said that guy's a killer. Well, I didn't say it that way, maybe. Maybe it's a long-winded thing like I'm doing now, try to be explanatory. And I guess that could be something that'd be good on my part, or somebody say, Michael, you want to shut up already? But I try to give as much detail as I can without having a snippet taken out.
Yeah.
So Frankie, in a period of time when I was in the street, no, he would have been a good captain. I pushed him. I made him an acting captain. I went to Pete. Johnny Rizzo was Jackie Knows was acting captain. Actually, you got the wrong guy there. So what do you mean? Stake him down. Johnny Rizzo's not. Forget about Johnny Rizzo. You got to put Frankie there. So, and at one point, I went to go meet Jojo Carrazzo on a meeting. I went to go meet him out in a German restaurant. Pretty good out in Queens.
Okay, so so Mikey Scars had a lot to do with Frank Cali.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a meeting. The FBI, I believe, that was some surveillance that was actually done with a casino in I believe it in Jersey in the late '90s, I believe. But
They
yeah,
were all there pretty much.
they were all there for a meeting. That was even Junior was there, and so that was just a meeting where they were you know don't know all the details, but I believe in the full length video that goes in more detail. But anyway, this was about Cali, and Frank Cali was there, and so he's definitely a gentleman. People liked him. He was a good leader. He was also very good at mediation, and then he was had this acumen for making money.
And a guy like that, he insulates himself with the Sicilians around him, and it just goes to show you can put them around you, but that doesn't mean when the time comes they're going to be there. Galanti learned the same way. He had Sicilians around him. When the time came, he got killed, and so did Galanti. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll get into that, but it's just kind of when you think about that, though, but because he brought them in, he married into that Sicilian life.
yeah.
And and he's here in this country. He grows up. He's born in this country, and it helped him for quite a while. But we'll get into that. And okay, so he finally gets made, right?
Yeah, he was 32 years old. It was in 1997. So the Jackie D'Amico, he's the one that actually sponsored him. And so if mirror in that time there was a ruling panel, and so Peter Gotti Jr., Jackie was on there. So he got made in '97, and so
And there's
One of the
no proof
interest.
of him having to make his bones through killing anybody.
No, that's what was interesting to me. He was known as a good earner, someone that.
And he had the Sicilians around
Yeah, exactly.
him. Yeah.
That's what he was done. He hung around with the Sicilian faction of the Gambinos on 18th Avenue. But yeah, we don't know no evidence that he was involved in a murder. Could he have been? Yes, but our sources would not did not have any information about a murder that he was involved in.
And Frank Cali had a certain type of friend around him. He didn't have like the street guy, the real street guy like Gravano around him and stuff like that. He
Right.
had guys around him like D'Amico and
Hmm.
who was kind of laid back.
Yeah.
Explain that to us.
Yeah, so he was around people that had a lot of influence in the family. So you know, Jackie the Nose. He was very. He wasn't. He came in, led a lot of the old timers, and came from one of the oldest crews of the Gambinos. And so then they bring in Michael Di Leonardo, Mikey Scars, and he's able to really help to bring money into that crew. And then one of those getting new blood in there, they brought in Cali, but Cali had been around, like I said, for about even though he's young when he got made at 32, he had done a lot of stuff with in the 90s with doing things with the the Joker poker machines. He did some loan sharking, and then one of the biggest pieces of, I guess, rackets that he was involved with was the telephone card scams, and then they had him oversee the Gambino family interest in that annual Santa Rosalia feast.
Oh, you're talking about this.
Yeah, that's what that was. It's the Santa Rosalia feast, and so that was basically what it happened is you'd have vendors out there, and they would pay some money to to the Gambinos to put their what do you call it, those their stations and whatever, and money was being raised. It's supposed to be going back to Italy.
So he was um, John Jr. kind of opened up the door for him also. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of it was about he was a good earner. That was really what it was. They needed ways to continue to bring in income. That was a tough time for the family. It had to go through all of the problems because of Sammy Gravano and all that.
Then Junior had all his trials.
He had all of his trials as well, and so it was a tough time, and so they need to bring in new blood, and he was one of the guys that was really well liked, had good connections, and this was also the time when you started getting more of an influence of the Sicilian faction of the family. So
Right.
that faction on 18th Avenue ended up being the most powerful faction of the family.
And Jackie the Nose was one of the knocks on him was he was an old timer. He wasn't a big money guy. He wasn't an earner like these young guys like Mikey Scars
Right.
and Frank Cali were. I mean, they knew how to make money, and they happened to be in his crew, and that helped him.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. He started making more money, then with them
he
in
brought
there.
that fresh blood in, and they were making money, big
Yeah.
money. What do they say? Frank Cali, anything he touched turned to gold.
Yeah, that's true. And so he was very that was above all, that's what the mafia likes. They like people that can bring in money.
Okay, so explain what happened at this point. So here he is; he's becoming powerful. Uh, I don't know. Was it kind of a surprise when he took over the family? Explain how he took over the family.
Yeah, so what happened was is that Peter so he ended up going to prison for a
Right.
while. So he got pinched in early 2003. There was some disputes on a trucking and contracting company that involved, they were trying to build a NASCAR speedway on Staten Island. And so anyway, there was a guy named Joseph Valaro that went undercover, started working with the authorities. And anyway, through all that undercover work, and there was this Operation Old Bridge, and so there was some drug trafficking going on between the Sicilians and the Gambinos, and so Cali was the Gambino ambassador to the Sicilian mobsters, and so he is a liaison between Jackie D'Amico and then the Sicilian connections there in the Israelilo family, and
that's
so
what made him why these guys were around him, wanted him to get his promotions and all that stuff. And
yes, yeah, that was because he had those connections, and then so they end up charging him with racketeering, extortion, and conspiracy. And so that was when Jackie the Nose got also charged. And anyway, what Cali did, he pled guilty to conspiring to extort money from Valaro, and so he got a short 10-month sentence and was out in 2009. And so around that time, also Cali's uncle John Gambino was elevated to the family's ruling panel, and so that created some influence. But then Gambino got in trouble, and so that allowed Cali to really come up and have a lot of influence.
And the
Around
Sicilian
2009, 2010.
and because of the pizza connection, the Sicilian connection really got lost a lot of the power that it had.
Oh yeah, yeah, it did, and that really, there's still some. Obviously, there's always going to be drugs, but Operation Old Bridge that happened in 2008, that where you had like 61, so Cali and about 61 other people in the mob were arrested, and so yeah, that pretty much terminated that big drug trafficking between Sicily and the Gambino family.
And when Cali came out, he actually had his own business. He was a very successful businessman, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, yeah. He had a business that imported Italian food and wine. His employees said that he was a kind and caring boss, and so he ended up resigning as president of the company after his arrest in 2008. So he had businesses that were not tied to organized crime, and so he was, just a family guy that most people thought he was just a family guy. He kept under the radar, so a lot of the people didn't realize, how he was involved. But after 2009, he gets out of jail or out of the MDC. He ends up again becoming really powerful, and they actually wanted him to become boss in 2013. So you had Peter or acting boss. So you had Peter Gotti that was imprisoned, and then Frank Cali was asked, would he want to be the acting boss, and so he declined. He said, well, he'd rather just be the underboss, acting underboss.
And okay, but there was a dispute too with these cards. Wasn't there? Like it led to some issues between.
Oh yeah, the phone cards. Yeah.
And he kind of negotiated that out. Explain that.
Yeah, that was very fascinating. So this was one of the ways that you saw how Frank Cali was able to get involved with some powerful and dangerous men and be able to come up with what I call a workable solution. So this was during the phone card scam. This was basically as a scam that you would get these phone cards, and it was supposed to have values, I don't know, $5, $10, $20. So you get these blocks of minutes where you can make international calls, and obviously being, you had a lot of people in the neighborhoods wanting to call Italy and Sicily. And so unfortunately the cards they'd work, they wouldn't work. Sometimes it'd work for a brief time. Other times you'd just get a busy signal. Customers would demand refunds, and then the distributors would simply then pull the cards out of circulation and then put replacements. And so what ended up happening was not the distributors had to pay. It'd go back to AT&T and MCI and all those companies. And so the mob got millions. I mean, this kind of
Yes.
rivaled like the
Remember,
gas scheme.
I remember back then everybody had a phone card in their wallet when you're out on the road because it was cheap to use them. If you needed, even if you had a home phone, you would go get the phone card.
Yep.
And you'd bring it back, and sometimes it wouldn't work. And I'm not going to. I know more about that than I'm saying. So, but I
Yeah,
talked about
yeah.
that before, so
But
I'm
it-
not going to talk about that right
No,
now.
no.
I talked
understand.
about that before, but
Yeah,
kind of-
exactly. And so
they would go
what
to a lot of bodegas. They would go to a lot of bodegas,
Mhm.
all those type of places where you had a lot of Mexicans, immigrants coming in. They
Yeah.
wanted to call home. I mean,
Mhm.
they were spreading them all over New York. They went upstate, New Jersey, downstate, but New York, they went up to Syracuse, Utica, and all
Oh
those places. And they would walk into these bodegas or
yeah. Mhm.
especially poorer neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And the people would say, "Oh, sure." Everybody was making the money off it, except the companies that eventually would have to pay the price.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So what ended up happening was you had, believe it or not, Joe Watts is the one who started this phone card operation. Then he brought in Jackie the Nose and brought Cali in, but then they got themselves in some trouble with Junior, and so there was some issues with the money. What was coming in, was it the right percentage? There was thoughts that some of the folks were, I guess, robbing the family. And so you had a panel at that time that of decision makers that were running the family. At this point, you had Jimmy Brown, Louis Valario, Jackie Nose, Peter Gotti, and Junior running stuff. And so
Nobody knew how much money Watts was making is the problem.
right, they didn't
I
know
mean, he
that.
was making a lot of money in keeping it.
Yeah, exactly. And he started getting a reputation of not kicking up like he's supposed to. But then you had little Nicky Carrazzo, who ran another crew in Brooklyn. He learned that Watts and Cali and D'Amico were spending off their basically making a lot of money off of this. And so Nicky started getting his guys into buying these phone cards off of Watts. And then when Nicky would hand Junior 10% of the tribute from the phone cards themselves, he asked Junior if he had any idea how much Watts and the other guys were themselves earning off the phone cards. And so anyway, they said Watts was basically running wild. He wasn't turning in the money to the administration, and basically Junior didn't know what was going on about it, and Watts basically was doing everything that he wanted, and that was some of the problems that caused Junior to have problems with Joe Watts. He
And
felt that,
Cali wound up smoothing it out in the long run. Mikey
yes,
Scars was happy
exactly.
about it.
Yeah, they end up giving like 25%, but no, 25
10%.
cents
I
a
think it was
card.
10.
Yeah,
They gave him 10% more, I think he said, and
yeah,
25 cents a card, something like
yeah,
that.
exactly. And so anyway, and then what? So Michael met with Junior and said, basically smoothed it over, and so yeah, I mean Junior was pleased with what Cali had offered, and they were off the hook.
And Frank Cali was just one of those guys that would walk around and not upset nobody.
Yeah,
He basically got
exactly.
along with everybody. He
Yeah,
may have had
exactly.
maybe behind the scenes people but in general, he was known as that guy you can go to if you had issues with another guy.
Right. And here's what's amazing about this is that one of the big companies on this scam was Connectco. They were, so they started selling these cards in 95. And by the next spring, they had activated $20 million worth of cards a month. And then this company went bankrupt. And so WorldCom ended up holding the bag for $94 million because of the scam. And so, it caused a lot of problems. It was part of the downfall of WorldCom.
And okay, so we get to October 2012. Capisci, after calling somebody else the acting boss of the family, came out, not the acting boss, I'm sorry, the underboss.
Yeah, under
Uh,
boss.
it was Frank Cali was named, and nobody really knew much about him except if
Right.
you were on the street.
Yes.
And even when he was the underboss, they really still didn't know much about him, did they?
No, and that's really what you're supposed to do. And so, that just shows you that, he wasn't one of these guys that need to be out in the limelight. He kept things underneath kept it very low key. You didn't, one of the things that he didn't do, he didn't want killings. They didn't kill people. They were with him there. He really, um, wanted to bring in better people. He wanted to see the mafia come into the 21st century, basically.
And so once again, Jerry Capici in
Hmm.
2015, and through the Daily News, he's named the new acting boss.
Yeah.
And explain what happened after that. There was in those kind of quiet years where all of a sudden they seemed a lot more organized than they were in a while.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Peter Gotti was influence was pretty much gone. The Gottis pretty much by that point were really didn't have much influence. And
John
uh,
stepped away from
yeah,
John Gotti
uh,
Jr. stepped away.
yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, and then you'd have Capisi would every once in a while put this stuff out there, and which wasn't necessarily right. I mean, he missed it a couple of times. He was the boss, but anyway, I think then in 2018 you had a report stating that Cali had infused the family with quote unquote zips, hoodlums from the old country, and then they were bulking up its heroin and oxycontin business, and then there was an Italians were starting to look into some stuff in Sicily, and they were saying that Cali is everything over there.
Yeah, they said that. They said he was everything, and the exact words
Yeah.
they used. And they
Hmm.
were actually, even though they were entering a new era, he was finding a way to make money.
Yeah, he was finding a way to make money. He was wasn't the he had those good ties back to Sicily, but he wasn't doing the violence. The violence was pretty much was regulated, reduced.
And as we know, he wasn't into violence, but violence showed up at his doorstep.
Yep.
And this is where we had a lot of things, a lot of claims made when this happened, and we're going to get into it. The death. Okay, so it's on March 13th, 2019.
Yes.
Somebody smashes into his truck outside.
Yes.
Why don't we take it from there? What happened?
Yeah. So this was in front of this home. He lived on Hilltop Terrace in the Todd Hill area, and so this was about 9:20 in the evening. He stepped out. There was
Callie comes out
10
and he starts
times.
arguing with him. You take it up from here. I'll leave you alone. You explain what
Yeah,
happened.
yeah. No, so what happened was, so there was a surveillance camera. So it showed the pickup truck striking Callie's parked Cadillac, and then there was a subsequent confrontation between the driver and Callie, and then you had a shooting. And then so Callie had tried to evade the killer by using his vehicle as a shield. So he tried to get you know go around the vehicle. And anyway, he gets hit 10 times with bullets from the 9mm handguns, falls down the street, and then the dude ends up running him over.
Yes, and
And
they were all kill shots. I mean, most of those were kill shots for
yeah,
one.
the guy, yeah, it was close, and so the guy was Anthony Camello, and so he never had any. So what we knew about him, so the guy was a tall guy, 6'3", decent looking kid, and he had worked. He graduated from actually he lived there on Staten Island. Graduated from Tottenville High School. He had graduated in 2012, which was 7 years before that. And then he started. He went out a couple of.
You got the media, and we'll get into the media was talking all this crap, who did it, whatever. We'll get into
Yeah.
that. But so he has his funeral, and let's pick
Mhm.
it up from there. So he's buried on March 13th, 2019. He's
Mhm.
buried.
Yeah, he's buried there on and I believe Moravian Cemetery. They're in Staten Island, New York, Staten Island.
And then the thing is, and we're gonna before we get into the garbage that happened, the other garbage. So what happened to Mr. Camello?
Yeah, so a lot of weird stuff, and so you remember this happened in May of 2019, right? And
Yeah.
so then he got indicted and all that, and so in July, so 2 months later, his defense attorneys, talking about Camello's defense attorneys, stated that Camello became obsessed with QAnon conspiracy theories. And so he believed that Cali was a member of the deep state. This is telling what the defense attorney said was going on
And there's
Camelo.
no evidence.
There's
He
no
wrote something on his
evidence.
hand. It was like, people are like, was he just playing everybody so he can get the insanity charge? Or
Yeah, exactly.
and
And he
then
was
COVID hit.
yeah,
Let's-
exactly.
eh,
COVID hit, but he was convinced that so he thought he had the protection of President Trump himself to handcuff Cali and place him under citizen's arrest, as apparently Camelo attempted months ago earlier with Mayor De Blasio and then Maxine Waters. I
Well,
didn't know.
I can understand those. I can
Yeah,
understand Maxine and De Blasio.
yeah. So apparently but he didn't try to arrest him. He pulled out a 9mm and shot him with 10 clips. 10 shots. So
Now
yeah, it
there was,
was
and there was
weird.
so now they might even be, so he's in an institution now because he's considered insane. Do you think
Yeah.
that they're doing that more because if they put him in prison, they know that there's a lot they're going to want to kill him bad?
Well, I agree with that. And then also, I did want to point out saying on the first court appearance, what was weird, and you kind of mentioned this, was he was displaying symbols and phrases supposedly associated with QAnon. He'd scrawled it on his hand with a pen. That was there at his court appearance. And so they said he was found not guilty by reason of quote unquote mental defect. But what's weird, Lee, is they refused to take a psychiatric exam, and then they were saying that his refusal could jeopardize his right to use the insanity defense, and then
And they still, so that means that they actually during COVID they sent him to the hospital, and during that time they pretty much the hospital determined that he was crazy.
yeah, in June of 2020, he was found mentally unfit to stand trial, and so he's in a mental hospital.
It's going to be interesting to see if they overturn that, to see if he's going to stay there. I mean, when you really think about it, being in a mental institution for such a brutal killing,
Mm.
and look at the guy. He doesn't exactly look like. I don't know how nutty he really is. Is he nutty like a fox?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, because it's weird how all of a sudden, I'm surprised they'd even give him a pen at the trial, and so or at the first appearance, and then he's able to scrawl that, and I don't even know what QAnon is, to be honest. I mean, it's
Well, that's good. Good. I have no idea what it is either. So, let's just keep it that way. It's
Yeah.
like, who the hell knows what it is? I don't really care
Yeah.
what it is as long as it stays away from me. But anyway,
Yeah.
okay. So let's. So there were a couple things that happened. As soon as he was shot, let me put this up. As soon as he was shot, this is the so why don't you tell us what happened between Vincent Fiore and these two gangsters right here? What they're talking about?
Yeah, so Vincent Fiore, was talking to another gangster, and then they were basically talking about the Frankie boy getting gunned down, and so basically what was said, Fiore was saying, "Oh wow," so Fiore was part of the Bronx faction of the family, and so you like I've said a couple of times, there's a lot of rivalry between these different factions within a family, so you see it all the time. And anyway, he was saying, well, that would allow Andrew Campos a possibility to increase his power, And so
Right.
that was what it was about. But you know, there was some. I know
No
that
pity amongst gangsters, huh? The guy's just killed, and you got other gangsters the same day.
Mhm.
Oh, it's good he's killed, even though he was doing his job as a boss.
Yeah, exactly. And Michael DeLeonardo really upset about it. I know I listened to him talk about it, and so you know, it is a scumbag move, someone to do that. But that shows you the treachery of the life. That you know,
Yeah.
it's more about themselves.
And
So
Michael DiLeonardo actually did a video on it, I believe, where he
yeah, yeah, that's
talks
where it
about that.
was.
If anybody wants to see that, because that video actually talks about that whole thing with Campos and what those guys said.
Yeah,
It's a pretty interesting video. Uh,
right.
okay. Oh my God, Lee's pushing a rat's video. Yes, I am. Okay. So let's move on now. So next you have so the media went into a frenzy because
Hmm.
let's explain this.
Yeah.
Okay, so the killer, according to the media in the beginning, was John Gotti's brother, Gene Gotti. He was just freshly out of prison,
Hmm.
and they came up with this. Explain what this story is that the media came up with as soon as this
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, so you know, this shows you the imagination of the media, and so they're implying. So what had happened was that two guys from the family, Gambino family, that was part of the Gotti crew or Gotti folks, Gene Gotti and John Coniglia. They got out of prison,
And this is
and
what the first sentence of this article is: the Gottis are back in town, and the bloodshed could just be beginning.
yeah, they're trying to think that Gene and possibly Caniglia was going to make a move to take over the family, and so it's just really bizarre. In fact, I saw where even they had interviewed or they had gotten Angel Gotti to ask her about it. I mean, she was all over Twitter and different places saying, "Hey, this is BS." You know, Gene Guy's not he's not interested in doing any of this stuff, and so wasn't true.
Yeah, it was, and
And
it
then
was just
she
one of.
admitted she said, "Yeah." Yeah," when they finally said, "Oh, now it's not true," then you know she wanted him to apologize.
So Gene Gotti's just out of prison. He just spent 30 years.
Hmm.
So 30 years out of prison, and the minute he steps out, and well, not the minute, but close, within the year, they are accusing him of trying to be the boss. And
Yeah.
here he is, 74 years old. He's just trying to get his life back together and go deep into retirement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not no truth to it, but you know, it sounded good. You know, the Gotti name sells newspapers, as they say back then. You know.
So, what's your opinion on um, him being the boss of the family? Do you think that he was a good boss? Listen, Campos and those guys, they all wind up going to prison later on, a couple years later. He could have been going to prison with them also. But if he wasn't, do you find him as a good boss? Was he a good boss?
Yeah, I see him. You know, I as someone looking from the outside, I see him being the type of boss that you need for the 21st century. I believe he had the chance to be another a modern day Carlo Gambino. I believe he had you know, he had so much potential. I mean, he could have lived another 30, 40 years and been continued to be the boss, and he might have been able to stay under the radar at least for a lot of it. You know, most likely, of course, he would have gotten arrested.
But up to that point, even though
Yeah.
he had that arrest, he was under the with the public. He was way under the radar.
Yeah, no one knew about him. You know, that's what, but isn't that what you're supposed to do in that life? You know, you don't want to be out in the open, especially, you know, you've got cameras on every corner, you've got all of this stuff going on. I mean, I just see him as, if, I'm in business, and if you want someone to be like let's say if you're a CEO or if you're someone that's a leader in a company, you want them to have a lot of these traits, which is the ability to negotiate, the ability to bring in people from different areas to be able to benefit, be able to think through and new opportunities, new ways to make money. Those were all positive traits from him. Plus, people liked him, and what's interesting is that you always hear the phrase, someone is it better be loved or to be feared? And usually, you hear in this life, the Machiavellian response is it's better to be feared. But he really took it a different level where maybe you can be loved and be a boss. That's what I saw.
Yeah, I mean, and he stayed under even though he was considered acting boss,
Hmm.
it seems like to me he fit in there and he had to become the boss.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they would put front bosses. They did all types of stuff like that, but that was done. Even though he was might have been the even when he was the acting underboss or underboss, he is the one that was making the decisions. They had someone up as a figurehead, and it's almost kind of like the thing with the chin and fat Tony Salerno is that type of thing. So who's really making the decisions? I believe it was Frank Cali.
Yes, and I appreciate everything you've done today
Thank you.
because you did a lot of research on this. And people,
Yeah.
listen, if you want to help support this channel, and some of you have been very kind, and I appreciate it.
Yes.
You can
Thank
send
you.
something like the Cash App or the PayPal. There's
Mhm.
a little heart underneath here, and there's also something else I like to discuss. People have been saying that they're not getting their, and I just found this out. It's kind of interesting that they're not getting their reminder when the show comes on. And people say, well, I already hit the button and everything. What
Mhm.
happens is 90% of the people on their phone there's a button on your phone where you have to agree to it. And a lot of people aren't hitting that button. You have to, you got to slide it over and you got to hit that button in order for that to go through. Otherwise, you'll hit it on YouTube, but it won't come through because 90% of the people that watch us are on cell phones.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of people go, hey, I hit the button. Make sure you do it completely through your phone. There's a process to do it.
Yeah.
Your phone has to give it permission. And there's a little button in there where you hit that button and give it permission. So I've seen that on a YouTube video. A lot of people say it's YouTube's making a mistake. No, it's people just forgetting to hit that button on their phone.
Right.
And so I listen, people. I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much, and I hope you like this, James. I appreciate you doing this story. Is
Yeah,
there anything
thank
you'd
you.
like to say before we leave?
No, no. Well, only thing I would like to say is thank you for, we have a couple of really great sources of information. I just want to thank them for,
Yes,
providing what they have.
we have a secret source. He's like a secret sauce, but he's a secret source,
Yeah.
and he knows
Yeah.
a lot
Someone
about this stuff.
pretty around connected people. We don't want to mention
And
names.
yeah,
but,
if we announce his name, then we have to worry about our lives.
yeah.
So we're not going to
Yeah.
name, okay?
Yeah.
But I don't give him my address. I'll give him yours, James.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, people, so much. We appreciate you. Please hit the like button, hit the sub button if you haven't subbed. And I really hope you enjoy this video. Take care.